Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, how's it going over there?
Not bad. Not bad. You and me were talking yesterday about lien waivers. You should kind of share with the listeners kind of what you've been going through with that or where you've had hiccups.
Hiccups is the right word. Challenges. So I guess I'll start with a little context. First off, as you scale, it might not matter on one deal, but as you start doing more, there's a lot of small things in the negotiation that you can start asking for to make your life easier, right? You can ask for, more aggressive tax prorations. One of the things we've talked about before is asking for access, right? I'm going to get my architect in there, the contractor's in there, so we're set to go on day one. One that's overlooked, and it may or may not be important to you, is title company. We like to control, usually the seller controls that. That's kind of the default. We like to control that when we buy for a couple of reasons. So like for flips, it's usually cheaper to come back to the existing title company you originally bought from, a couple months ago. And then also a lot of times, Chicago might not record the county might not record the deed. There might be funky things when you purchased it, like a death instrument or power of attorney letters. And it's just easier to go back to where you originally purchased from because they already have that all on file. But the bigger reason is the draw process. So like our friends at Renovo, they're great. Their draws are just direct. You don't have to deal with the title company. It's super smooth. Most lenders are not run that way, though. You run the construction escrow through the title company. So if I buy a house from Mark, you're the seller and you pick the title company, I'm pretty much stuck going through that title company for my escrow for my construction, unless I want to pay title again and go to the title company of my choice and incur that extra fee. And so you get in a situation where you don't have a relationship there, and every title company is different. Some are pretty loose and some are just very, very strict and will not release, six-figure lien waivers because you don't have a $50 receipt. So it's one of those things as you scale, like it's an easy thing to ask for. The buyer's not going to care. Say, hey, we'll get you this price, but we are going to do it at X title company where I have a relationship with. So avoidable mistake. Like in retrospect, I easily could have. The situation I'm in, I could easily avoid it of just throwing that in the negotiation at the last second and controlling title.
It is night and day doing business with a traditional title company or someone like Renovo when it comes to having to get those approvals. Like if you've only gotten lien waivers and approvals from Renovo, you haven't gone through the real process yet. The granular detail and especially if you're getting into larger projects, the way they expect your line items to go on all your documents, like they have to be perfect. And if you're off, they'll make you redo it. And if you go all the way down to pick up that check and you're off and you got to come back, it's a horrible, horrible feeling to leave there.
Yeah. And like, you got to keep the project going. Like you got to keep hanging, like you just end up getting out in front of this thing. And like, it depletes capital. It's definitely, it's an avoidable situation if you know what you're doing. Right. So, and it's not like I have a great, your lender is kind of out of the picture at that point. You're dealing with the title company. Lender can say, hey, the draw's good to go, but the title won't release it until you have everything.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing too. I see a lot of people when I used to be in Chicago title a lot, you see a lot of people and they're like getting mad at them and that works against you. So always work with the title company, even no matter how mad you are at, you'll get more bees with honey with them for sure.
Well, yeah, you're going to go back for another draw, right?
Yeah.
Don't burn that bridge.
Those are the people you should be bringing lunch to, sending Christmas gifts to, and stuff like that to make sure that they help you or are more flexible with you. So,
yeah. All right, I'll stop rambling. What do we got for housing provider tip of the week?
All right, housing provider tip of the week. This is again, I was talking to somebody the other day and they kept getting broken into. Their lockbox kept getting broken into and they kept changing the locks. But I asked them, I said, where are you putting your lockbox at? And they have a 3-flat that's, I think it was in Logan. And they're just putting their lockbox right there on the gate at the sidewalk. Like, so right under his mailbox. So anybody that walks down the street is seeing the lockbox. Now, that is very obvious and easy to find for other realtors or contractors, but it's also obvious and easy to find for everyone. So if you have a lockbox out there, whether it be for realtors, you're showing it, or if you have it for your vendors, make it a little more discreet. Put it somewhere that is not right there for everyone to see, because a couple things. One, those lockboxes are very easy to break. If anyone's ever taken a hammer to it, you could get it done in about 2 minutes and get the keys out. So making sure that they're not in plain view and only the people that you want to have access to those lockboxes really truly know where they're at is just a housing provider / security tip of the week.
All right. Mark, our guest today was on episode 5. I think the first person we reached out to when we were starting this podcast. So it's nice to go full circle here, 100 something episodes later. But our guest today the managing broker of Second City Real Estate, full service brokerage that specializes in working with investors. Also where I hang my license. She's the co-founder of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, the Chicago Real Estate Meetup. Also been featured on numerous podcasts. I mentioned ours, but some bigger ones, Bigger Pockets, the Joe Fairless, Jake and Gino's Wheelbarrow Profits, in numerous publications such as Chicago Agent. On top of that, she is an investor herself. Welcome back to the show, Brie Schmidt. Brie, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
We are excited, and we appreciate. I know you were right around the corner here from having your second kid, so we appreciate you taking time out of your busy life and joining us here.
Yeah. So if I stop mid-sentence and go, ooh, it's because the baby just kicked me right in the ribs.
So, all right. So you did just a ton of volume in 2021. We want to talk about that and dive into some specific areas. But at a macro level, 2021 we saw a lot of growth, right? And it's going to be fun to go back and listen to some of these episodes where we talk about, there was 15 bids, most of them over ask, and and so forth. But looking back at 2021. What do you think was the most surprising part of the year?
Q2. We had a really insane spring. It's like our markets, generally speaking, I always say like Chicago's kind of like a bell curve, especially with 2 to 4 unit properties, right? Our winters are really slow. I mean, last winter I took off to Arizona for 3 months because there's really not much for me to do here. We go from 2 showings, maybe a month tops in winter to, 20 a week in summer. But usually our market starts picking up, let's say mid-April, even like by mid-May. I have a lot of clients who are like, when's it going to happen? When are we going to start seeing more inventory? But then like June, July, August, we're pretty busy. And then it starts slowing down September, October, and we go back into, our hibernation period. But our spring market was beyond insane, like well beyond the point of not being fun. We did more business in Q2. At least I did more business in Q2 than I did all of last year combined, to the point where my husband was like, do you live here? Because I was just gone. I was out from 6 o'clock in the morning till, 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, just trying to keep up with everything. But then we had a really, really slow end of summer. Our market pretty much after 4th of July started to really drop off. And really after Labor Day, it's been non-existent, which is unusual for us. Usually we still have a pretty steady pace going into, the holidays, and then it starts dropping off right around Halloween-ish.
Got it. So going back to that Q2, a lot of people were probably saying like, hey, I was looking in Q2, there wasn't a lot of inventory. Like, were you busy on the buy side, on the sell side? Because there's a lot of people who wanted to be busy there, but could not find the actual product.
I would say 80% buy, 20% sell.
Got it. So it's just having that many people who want to buy, going around from showing to showing to showing, making offers, and having X amount of them actually hit.
Yeah, it was the inventory was actually great in spring. We had, I would say, quadruple the inventory that we had in September. And you just had to be competitive is what it was. You got to have really aggressive offers. You had to have really aggressive terms. You had to be really flexible with things. And you had to go out and be looking at properties and acting quite fast. It was very common for a property to be listed on Wednesday. They were only doing showings on Saturday, multiple offers due Sunday. That was the typical MO of things. And it still kind of is. When good properties get listed, if you're not seeing it the first weekend, you're kind of out of it.
The conversation of lack of inventory came up all year long. Like what was there even that as an issue, or is that what was giving everyone the impression that there was a lack of inventory?
I mean, there is a lack of inventory. We have, again, on our buy side, if you gave me 50 properties that were decent, I could probably sell them all right this second. The problem is finding those properties that are decent. We just had a lot popping up in the spring market that we didn't see the rest of the year.
Yep. How does it look now? Like now that things have slowed down, because I'm seeing a lot longer market times. Is there more out there now, or is that stuff just overpriced?
Overpriced, really. I mean, I always tell clients, like anything that's been in the market for 2 weeks, you have to consider that it's overpriced. If it's been in the market for 30 days, it's definitely overpriced. The problem though with multis is that sellers typically, they don't care. If their tenants are paying rent and the property is cash flowing, if they sell it next week or they sell it in 6 months, it doesn't really matter to them. So they may or may not be willing to take a price hit. And I know some landlords that will just stick it on the market to see what they can get. And if they don't get their price, they'll just pull it off the market and keep it. So they're not necessarily motivated to sell or to negotiate on price.
Yeah, I've that latter you just mentioned. I have seen that a lot where they just see their friend down the block sold for X, and they're like, "Oh, cool! If I can get that, I'll throw it out there."
Yeah,
and I have nothing to lose by it. And they have an inferior product, so they just sit there at that higher number, hoping for someone to bite on it.
Mm-hmm. I once had a property. Oh my gosh, this was actually even years ago. So we talk about the market being crazy, and we were talking about this before the show. It's been this crazy since about 2016. It's been about almost 5-6 years where we've seen this multiple offer scramble for inventory. Everyone's complaining about not having enough options. This has been going on for years, but we had a property where I came in with a client. We offered on it maybe like 95% of list. The seller absolutely would not go under list price. So then we came in, the client walked and we bought something else. I then had a fit maybe 2-3 months later from another client who said that they wanted that at list price, made the offer at list price, what the seller had agreed to sell it for. And they said, no, we did some improvements. We're going to raise the price. And it sat in the market for 2.5 years. He would literally not accept a single penny under what he wanted for it. And it sat for 2.5 years until at that point, prices had gone up, right? And it had been at the price of what market would dictate. But, some sellers will do that. They'll just let it sit there, as long as they can. Tenants are paying rent, right? They're in no rush. It is what it is.
Yeah, they're in the driver's seat there. So you mentioned like it being super competitive. I'm sure you have a lot of clients talk to you like, well, the market's hot and, I don't want to buy near the top. I'm sure that conversation comes up a lot. So can you talk through like, how do you handle it? How do you make sure you're still putting out a good investment for your client at the same point, making sure that they're aggressive and actually getting a property under contract?
So from a market perspective, right? And I was actually just talking, so Mark and I we met the first time in San Francisco at a conference. Remember that, Mark? I don't remember what year that was, very long time ago. But I still go to that conference every year. And I did. So about 4 years ago, I went to this conference in San Francisco, and they had Bruce Norris, who is some famous economist from California, who apparently predicted the real estate crash, back in 07, 08. And he spoke at this conference about the impending market crash, right? That the economy is going to go to shit. We're going to see housing prices go down. I mean, that was 4 years ago, right? And it has not happened. At pretty much every conference I've been at for the last 5-6 years, they've been talking about, this impossible market crash, and it just hasn't happened. So will it happen? I don't know. I can tell you right now, in the last month, I've had 3 clients who bought with me back in like 15, 16, who just did refinances and just wanted to share with me what their property values were. Because even back then, people were saying like, this is the top of the market. And they had 6-figure gains in their property values, and they didn't really do much work to it. They did some slight improvements, but a lot of that is just natural market appreciation. So is now the right time to buy? I mean, I don't have that answer because I don't know what the market's going to deliver, but I have not seen anything in the last 8 years that I've been doing this to indicate that prices are going to go down anytime soon. Additionally, and I know we talked about this, I think on the first podcast, what was it? Of the 11 of the last 13 recessions, we saw an increase in property values. There's only been 2 recessions where we ever saw a decrease in property values. The dot-com burst in the 90s, and it was a 2% reduction in property values. And then obviously the housing crash, where we saw, I think it was a 28% reduction in housing prices. But that's not, just because we have a recession doesn't mean that we're going to have a reduction in housing prices. Now, from a client perspective, right, it really comes down to at what point the deal makes sense for you. So when we have, especially when we have multiple offers, we have essentially an offer calculator we build out for clients. It breaks down what we project expenses to be, vacancy repairs, CapEx, tax increases, utility bills, what current rents are, what market rents are, if you go to do some improvements, what those costs will be, what the market rents would be after the ARV on those. And it all breaks it down into a cap rate, cash on cash calculator. And then really it's up to the client of playing around with the numbers and figuring out like, at what point does this make sense to you, right? At what point are you gonna be pissed if you find out that someone went $1,000 over and you lost out on the deal and now you're kicking yourself in the foot? And I always tell the story of one of my first clients. We were buying a property. It was multiple offers. It was a bank owned, it was a foreclosure property. I think it was listed at like 829. They had multiple offers and he told me he wanted to offer 876. This was back in 2014. So well before multiple offers were normal. And I, told him that was an extremely, extremely aggressive offer for that time. And he had said, you know what, I slept on it. And I think if someone bought it for 875 and I had offered lower, I would be mad. But if they got it for 890, then I would feel like I put my best foot forward and I lost the deal fair and square. Well, when we went to go do the appraisal, the appraiser had asked what the other offers were, and he wrote it on the appraisal, and no one had offered over 835. Right. So he had gone tens of thousands of dollars over the next offer, and he wasn't mad about it. He didn't regret his decision. He had said, you know what? I really wanted this property. I'm okay going, $40,000 over anyone else. And we ended up selling it for 1.1 million, like 4 years later.
I mean, both you guys, I think, agree. If the numbers make sense for whatever your strategy is, like, it makes sense to buy. Like, that's not really us as professionals taking those questions. I feel like we can't even really truly advise you. It has to come from them and what makes sense to them, right?
Mm-hmm. I can't talk anyone into a deal, right? It's not, my job is to give you the information so that you feel comfortable making your own decision. But I'm not the one up at night worried, did I offer enough? Is this too much? What if I overpay? Like, that's not what keeps me up at night, right? I've got a kicking baby in my belly. That keeps me up at night. But like, it really needs to come from you and your level of confidence. And you know what? I was like, so what? That guy paid $40,000 over the next highest offer. He sold it again for a huge profit years later and didn't put any work into it. So at the end of the day, he's still up. Yes, he could have been up another 40, but he was up over $200,000. Who's going to cry over 40 at that point?
I think in that scenario, even if the prices went down, say, his rents made sense, he was cash flowing, and his his value went down to 700 for a few years before it went back up. Like that's not the end of the world either. Like, value really doesn't matter if you're truly just buying it at a cap rate.
Yeah, and value only matters when you're selling, right? And so most investors don't have any plans to sell in the next couple of years. Buy and hold is a very slow, boring way to wealth accumulation. So for most of us, we plan on holding for 10, 15, 20 years. The issue is timing the market at that point when you're ready to sell.
The dilemma I see a lot of investors or potential investors wrestling around in their head with is, if I buy right now, will I miss out on some opportunity later if the market crashes? Or like, am I really it's not even the top of the market. It's like, what can I get?
Finite amount of capital.
Yes. So that's the it's been about 6 years. Everyone's been bringing that to me, like, oh, if the market crashes, should I not buy right now? It's like, the market's never going to crash because you're waiting for it to crash. Like that's like, no one was waiting in 2007. We were all in 110% loan to value, like on everything. Like there was no one waiting for the market to crash. No one knew what that meant even. So, but I think that's the number one thing I see people wrestle with is one in the hand versus what could be down the road.
And this is a terrible, terrible analogy, but it makes 100% sense. So growing up, my parents, we got a shelter dog, right? We got him when he was like a year old, and we had him until he passed about 12 years later. But whenever you would yell in the house, right, he would run and cower under the table. So even if you yelled, like I yelled to my mom upstairs, the phone call was for her. My dog would run and cower. Like, we never hit him, obviously, but whatever happened in that first year of his life, whatever abuse he had, stay with him the rest of his life. And that's kind of how investors are based on the crash, right? We're always going to cower. As soon as there's a a tiny little indication or someone says something about the market crashing, people are running and cowering under the table like, oh my God, this is going to happen again. But statistically speaking, that was a once in a lifetime crash. This just because it's happened before doesn't mean it's going to happen again. 11 of the last 13 recessions, we did not see any sort of decrease in property values.
Yeah. It's a shame because I've seen a lot of people wrestle with what I just said, and they've missed out on so much opportunity. Think about just anything you're talking about, any neighborhood that you guys work with, and a lot on the North Side. If they would have bought 5 years ago, what they would have looked like today. Like even if they bought one property, that they would have they would have cash out today. That would be huge. So it's a shame that that has held some people back from actually being very successful early on in their career.
Yes, I don't really like the hesitation. I mean, most people that we work with don't have that hesitation anymore. Because again, like if you're, hey, if you need a year to think about it, go for it. But we're not really going to waste our time, having weekly conversations with you if you're not ready because you're scared of the market. Most of our client base is ready to offer yesterday.
How does that conversation change with house hackers versus straight up investor, just buying a 3 flat for 100% investing versus house hacking? Does that change at all? That conversation of is it now the right time? I imagine you have 2 different conversations with those 2 different people.
Absolutely different conversations. Because with the house hacker, there's a lot more, right? Part of it's your housing. That I've had clients before who are like, hey, we rent a 1-bedroom in River North, right, for $2,500 a month. It's like our primary objective is to reduce our housing payment. So if you can save me $1,500 a month, right, that's a huge win for me. Absolutely, I can do that. So there's a lot more of a personal need for it as well. It's not just the investment property. I find that they tend to be more concerned about, right, what kind of tenants they're going to get, because they're the ones that, generally speaking, they have a full-time job. They're going to be the ones dealing with the tenant issues. So living in a nicer area or with tenants like themselves tends to be more of a priority than the numbers, or living in an area that they want to live as well. We just had clients who we looked all spring for them. We made offers. We backed out of, I think, 2 or 3 deals this summer. They were pregnant. They were really concerned about getting somewhere before the baby came. And they were like, I remember talking with them. There was a property we looked at. It was like a 1-bedroom, 800 square feet. I'm like, you guys don't understand how much stuff babies have. Like living in an 800 square feet apartment with a baby sounds like the worst idea in the world. And so now that they've had the baby, they're coming back and looking, and they're like, yeah, let's start looking at like duplex units. I'm like, I told you, your priorities have changed. So they are more than willing. They want to live in a specific area now. They understand that their cash flow is going to be less than what we were looking at before, but that's their new priority, right? They want to be in good schools. They want to be in something that they can grow into. They're not going to take the 3-2 duplex now, but they want that option down the road for when they extend their family.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So before we dive into specific neighborhoods, I want to put a bow on this because we didn't talk about lending at all. And I think that's one of the biggest things we're going to look back in 10 years and be like, oof, damn, we could have locked in everything at 3%, right? Like, there's just locking in a beautiful brick building at 3%, like it's hard to lose there if you're going to hold that thing long term. That's the biggest thing. Prices have gone up, but your cost of debt has gone down just so dramatically.
It's like free money. I just did my refi. I did my personal house at a 15-year at 2%. And then I did my investment properties on a 20-year at 3%.
Inflation's at 6%. Like you are making money.
Yeah.
You're literally making money. It's ridiculous.
So one of the concerns when COVID happened, one of the first things I remember happening was our lender that we work with, typically we work with 2 lenders, but one of them had reached out to me. He's like, listen, things are changing. We need to have a conversation with your team about what's going to happen moving forward. Right. And they were talking about, like we're looking at maybe 6-12 month reserves now. We're looking at all these different things as far as like, if you've lost your job, we'll need you back at your job at 3 months before we'll consider your applicant versus before you needed, an offer letter. That didn't happen, right? So like all the fear about the lending guidelines changing was all a very temporary thing, where the lending guidelines are back to what they were before COVID. There's really not any issues there unless you took forbearance. Then you'll have some issues, but otherwise, business as usual with that side of things. Rates, right, have been fluctuating this year. I did my refinance back in spring. I'm not sure they've gone up since then. I don't personally think that we'll be at the point of, said when Mark and I were buying years ago, rates were, like commercial loans were 5-6%. That was that was a good deal.
That was like 2 years ago, like maybe 18 months. Like that wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was a couple of years ago. So even I bought in 2017 at 5%. That was standard. We refinanced at 3%. It was great. I don't think we're going to see rates in like the sixes for a very long time. I think they'll still be low. I'm not sure they'll be this low, but every time I've refinanced, which has been 4 times over the last 10 years, it was like, you better refinance now because rates are never going to be this low again. And I've always gone lower, of course. So again, like, it's just like the how, like no one can predict it, right? Anyone that says they know, right, what rates are going to be in the future, what the housing market's going to be in the future, what the prices are going to be in the future, like no one really knows. We'll just have to, see what happens. Now, where our issues with financing comes in is, program availability. There's the low money down programs are very difficult to work with. FHA, first time ever, actually, that FHA, we just got our new loan limits for 2022. Typically they're very minor increases, 10 grand. Every year FHA will increase their loan limits by like 10, 15. Conventional goes like 50 to 80 usually every year. This year FHA went above like $50,000 increases, which is a huge help for us because that's one of the hardest things about that program is, the loan limits are much at this point, $200,000 to $300,000 less than conventional loan limits. On top of that, with FHA, you have the self-sufficiency test on 3 and 4 unit properties, which pretty much kills any option of looking at those sort of properties either. So without FHA, there's a 5% down program available, but it's only available in certain census tracts, right? And it's only available on 2 unit properties. And then there's 10% down, and then obviously conventional programs. So that's really been our main challenge, has been financing options and inventory.
Yeah. So going above those challenges, though, still had a record year, right?
Yeah. We just hit 60 million.
Woo! I'm a small piece of that. So let's get into the neighborhoods here.
Yeah.
Let's start in 2021. Then I want to ask you about the future. But in 2021, where was the most activity? Like, where did you see like, wow, I didn't expect neighborhood X to be this hot?
Again, it's been steadily increasing over the last couple of years. There's not been like this huge pop in certain markets. We've got, let's take the Wicker Parks, the Bucktowns, the Logans, right? The Lincoln Parks, the Ravenswood, Avondale, North Center, Lincoln Square areas, right? Prime areas that people generally want to live in are very, very familiar with. The expectation is if you're buying in those neighborhoods, right, you're looking at a 5+ year stay, right? Because again, it depends on the clients, it depends on everyone's perspective of things. Most clients come to us and have a plan. We want a house hack 1, 2, 3, and then buy our forever house, or 1, 2, buy our forever house, right? You're not buying in those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods are where you're going to live for a while. And again, your cash flow, your cap rate, your cash on cash are going to be lower in those areas. We have a lot of clients then we started the brokerage in 2014. So a lot of the clients that we worked with in the beginning are now at that point where they've already house hacked once or twice. Now they're ready to find something a little bit more forever. So we've done a lot of business in those areas this year, specifically because it's been the life cycle of our clients. Our clients are pretty much all repeat clients. So anything we've done in those areas has generally been it's the second or third purchase and they're looking for something more forever. Now, the first time investors are generally looking like Avondale, Albany Park, Portage Park, Irving Park, right? Along, I would say like a mile along 90 from Belmont to Foster. That still is the sweet spot when it comes to investment properties for cash flow. Generally nice areas, no concerns about, safety or not wanting to live there, but they're not super cool, right? You tend not to have a ton of friends that currently live in those areas. But that's really where we're still seeing a lot of the growth and the activity for the first phase investor.
Yeah. We said it several times on the show, going up and down the blue line. Like it just keeps, you just keep getting another stop. Yeah. Eventually you get out by me. You say you don't have a lot of friends there. I got a lot of friends out here. All right. So, we're into these different areas. Looking ahead, do you feel things will just be kind of business as usual, or is there anywhere where you feel extremely bullish on, or that the market is undervaluing? Like, do you see any of these neighborhoods, these edge neighborhoods, that it's like, the market is undervaluing and this is going to pop? Or is it more slow and steady, you think, moving forward?
I think it's more slow and steady. So examples of those neighborhoods would be like Hermosa, Belmont Cragen, Westridge, right? Over the last 8 years that we've been doing this, we've gone to those neighborhoods. We've never had someone buy in those neighborhoods. Even though the prices are lower, the cash flow is higher. And generally speaking, in those areas, they tend to not like them. It's too far from stuff, right? Like let's take Westridge, for example. I've gone up to Westridge and shown probably 20 clients over the last 8 years, Westridge. Never had a client even offer on a property, and they never want to go back to look at Westridge. One of the issues is there's no transportation. There's no public transit in that area. Same with Belmont Cragen and same with Hermosa. The risk is a lot higher. They're not seeing a lot of gentrification in those areas. It's very slow moving still. So it's offering a different tenant class than you're going to get going half a mile east or half a mile south. And that's again, if you're a house hacker, that's one of your concerns is what kind of tenants am I going to be dealing with, right? Are there mattresses on the floor? Do we have issues with bed bugs, right? If their car breaks down, are they going to be late on rent now? Those are all concerns with a working house hacker that doesn't have the time to deal with these kind of things. And they're generally above their head a little bit. If you have a full-time property manager like Mark, right? Mark, you've dealt with these things a million times over. You know exactly how to handle them. But a first-time landlord, it can be extremely overwhelming, extremely stressful. And you've got to go through your first eviction, right? Potentially. And that seems to be the deterrent for those neighborhoods. So I'm still not seeing much progress in those areas and haven't for the last 8 years.
I think in those areas that you're talking about specifically, not so much Westridge, but as you go a little further western to Belmont Cragen and Hermosa, I think you have a couple of things. You have not as many updated units, so they're not updated the same way. So you do run into more issues as a landlord. You do have, I think, the tenant class. If we're going to rate in our system, we go from B to C when it comes to just the overall investment. And those do present drastically different challenges for the ongoing management, especially if someone wants a house hack and live there. So I think you hit that pretty spot on.
Yeah. Now, where we have seen lots of movement is like the Palmer Square, right? Like West Logan, North Avenue or north of North Avenue, like West Humboldt, right? That has seen a lot of movement west, especially in the last 8 years. But once you get up to like Belmont, it stops. It doesn't really go very west. Along the 606 for sure. But, outside of that, like that's really the only area I've seen like more movement that wasn't cool before. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also throw in like, I call it West Avondale or South Irving. But as you get over towards like Pulaski there, like that's the one spot I'm more bullish on. And I'm bullish because because I rehab units, when I go to do a nice rehab, they have nothing to pull from the west. So they always pull from the east. Like I'm always getting that beautiful Avondale as my comp. Like it's you get nice comps there when you're on the fringe. So if you're doing a rehab, it's like there's enough advantage there where I'm like, okay, I can, I would love to be 4 blocks east, but I like it here.
Yeah. For you, Tom, I agree 100% in that. But for the house hacker that's going to come in and just paint the place, I think that ends up being the challenge.
That's that was a great point by, I think, Brie or Mike, I can't remember which one of you said it, but you're going to have more CapEx issues there. Those buildings have not been maintained as strong. Mm-hmm. And therefore, like you don't have to gut, but you're probably doing, roof, parapet walls, masonry, taking out the boiler to put HVAC. Like there's a lot of just like what I would call wasted expense that's not going to really drive rent, but you have to take care of it.
Absolutely. We just had a property. We sold it last year in Roscoe Village on Melrose. Fantastic property. The seller, they'd been in the family for like 40 years. The son took over about 20 years ago. He owned a plumbing company. It's like he rated all the plumbing on it, all the kitchens, all the baths, like the whole interior. Tenants were at market rent. Fantastic. Like nothing needed to be done cosmetically, but the roof had not been touched in like 30 years. The furnaces are from the 90s. It had, I'm thinking the fuse boxes, mm-hmm. right? The siding was, from the 60s. So we had like an $80,000 renovation budget on the property, but it was all CapEx stuff that wasn't going to increase your rents, and that's what you have to understand, those things when you're going to make your offer of like, hey, this property still needs like $80,000 of work. Do the furnaces work currently? Yes. Are they going to go pretty soon? Probably, and you should plan for those expenses. But he went to go do a refinance, within a year and came up pretty much the same what he bought it for, because nothing he did to the property increased the value, right? Everything he did to the property was just normal maintenance, repair kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's deferred. So you have to take it all in one chunk.
Yeah.
And it just kills you.
Yeah. You're not going to replace one of the 4 furnaces if it breaks, you might as well do them all at the same time.
Yeah. So we've talked a little about just like your thoughts on, where the market is going, but let's talk Chicago specifically, right? Because I'm sure you get asked a lot just about taxes, crime, pension crisis. We hear it all the time. When those get brought up to you, what's the typical Brie Schmidt response?
Well, crime depends, right? I think it depends on your tolerance level. I always tell clients like, listen, my job is to meet strangers and vacant houses for a living. I don't go in places that I don't personally feel comfortable. But I've also lived in the city for 17 years. So my definition of what's safe is my tolerance is a lot higher. I've definitely had clients who, especially if they're not originally from Chicago, have a little bit of an adjustment, looking at areas that are more cash flow based versus areas that they're currently used to living in. But it just becomes a personal decision, right? Again, it doesn't keep me up at night, but if it keeps you up at night, you need to be, changing your strategy or pivoting to something that maybe is in a better area for you, but is less cash flow. So that's a really personal decision. Pension crisis. I mean, we're so screwed. I don't even know where to start with that. And we've been so screwed for decades, right? Like the hole is so big. I can't even imagine us ever getting out of that situation. So how that's going to be handled, I do not know. But that is not just a crisis that our city is facing. That's a crisis that a lot of cities are facing. So that is a solution that needs to be handled on a higher level, I believe. Taxes. Ooh, this is a good one. So we always plan for tax increases, right? I never even look at when we're running numbers for clients and doing their offer calculator. We don't even bother looking what the current MLS taxes are because it's completely irrelevant to me, right? Your lender is going to look at that and tell you like if it fits into your qualification from a PITI perspective. But from my perspective, as far as like what this property is going to do from a cash flow basis, it is completely irrelevant. So what I did, so every 3 years we reassess properties, right? 2021 is the last, this assessment year. 2018 was the last one. So what I did is I went back and looked at clients who bought 2017, 2018 before the last reassess, 2017, 2018, around there, before the last reassessment. And went back and looked through what their property values were assessed at before they purchased, right? Because generally speaking, the assessor gives you a much higher increase if it was just recently purchased. So like year over year, my properties that I purchased 10 years ago have every triennial have not seen like major increases. But when you buy something, you will see a major increase. So anyways, I went back and looked at all my files from that year, from those 2 years, and looked at what they bought it for, what it was currently assessed at as compared to the purchase price, right? And what their new assessment was compared to the purchase price, and found that on average, the assessor was reassessing them about 73% of the purchase price. So if you bought it for, let's say you bought it for $1 million and it was currently valued at 500, your assessed value would come in somewhere around 730. So I took that average. So when we do our tax projections for clients, we use 80% now as our number. So we're looking at, hey, if it's assessed at, 500 and you're buying it for 750, right? We're going to take 80% of that 750 times 2%, which is the general tax rate average. And that's what we're going to project your taxes to be. So I've had it happen before where clients have called me up years later and said, oh my God, Brie, my taxes went up. I'm like, how much? And they tell me, I'm like, cool, you're actually making more money than I thought you would. And they're like, what? I'm like, let's go back to the original offer calculator that I built for you and see. And you'll see, like, I thought you'd be at $12,000. Like you were at 8, I predicted 12, and it came in at 10. So you're actually making $2,000 more a year than I projected. Then they're happy, right? But if I'm telling them that, like, hey, your taxes are going to be 8,000 and they get raised to 10, well, now you're not happy and you're cash flowing much less than I projected. So that's something that, we build into things on all of our clients, all of our offers. We always project tax increases. Now, this next year coming up is going to be really interesting. So if you don't know what happened, when COVID hit, one of the first things they did, which doesn't make any sense to me, is the assessor went through and said, we're going to lower everyone's assessment value, right? And everyone's like, oh, great, like we're going to get a tax break. No, we're not. Because just because you lowered people's assessed value doesn't mean anything if everyone across the board got lowered, right? The city still has their own tax obligations. So the city takes their tax obligations every year and divides it by the total amount of assessed value, right? And then that's how they determine the tax rate. So Chicago always gets shit for being like the second highest tax rate in the country. And we just had a huge tax rate increase because we lowered everyone's assessed value. So now I don't know if we're the highest in the country or if we're still the second, but we're definitely up there. So I'm assuming Chicago is going to get, more negative media attention about our ridiculously high tax rates. So when this was a reassessment year, when the assessments came out, and some are still coming out, we haven't seen Lakeview yet, but like I'm in Jefferson. So we saw our Jefferson assessments come out. We saw substantial increases, right?
I can attest to that.
You were lucky if you got, let's say, 125% increase was lucky. I saw, almost close to double on some properties for clients. That being said, that does not mean your taxes will double, right? Because the tax rate changes every year. So again, the city takes their total tax obligation and divides it by what their assessed value is in their, county, city, whatever. And that's how we come up with the tax rate. So I have a feeling we're going to see a much lower tax rate next year. It's still going to be, your taxes aren't going to be less than they were this year. I can guarantee that. But I don't think it's going to be as an extreme jump as the current tax rate times the current assessed value.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to underwrite it to be safe, but I agree with that assessment. A couple of just random comments on that. This might be anecdotal, but I feel too, like when you buy something that was a permitted job, it's like our flips that we do and we get to an end buyer that are fully permitted, I feel those get hit up way more because they have the ammunition.
Yep.
Yeah. So just be aware if you're buying that beautiful turnkey, it's great. They got permits. It protects yourself. Everything's done right. You're probably going to get hit up harder, right? They have that ammunition to say, oh no, he bought it for this, but we also got this, $300K rehab on file as well. Again,
like some people like, oh, it pisses me off. This is one of my pet peeves. I just had this happen. I'm just going to throw out some random numbers here because I don't remember the exact numbers, but we were under contract for a property. He bought it for 750. And the seller had bought it like 3 years ago for like 625, let's say. And he probably put like 50 grand into it, right? So his all in is like 675 and he's selling it for 750. So my client starts getting like nitpicky on the he's like, well, he could afford this because he's making 75 grand on it. And he didn't do
Totally
it.
totally not relevant.
Totally not relevant. Like that's a really bad attitude to look at things. Because what you're not considering is all the seller costs, the realtor costs. So I broke it down for him and used a projection. Like he's actually making like 15 grand, but like that also relates to taxes too. People are like, oh, well, I'm scared of a tax increase. Again, like then you shouldn't be playing this game, right? It's the cost of doing business. Tax increases are the cost of doing business in this game. So are rent increases, right? We get also to project rent increases for you. But yeah, it was just really irked me when people do that. Like, I'm sure they look at your flips, hey, he bought it for 300, he's selling it for 800. But what they don't know is the cost of renovation is hundreds of thousands of dollars for the kind of flips that you do. It's not a $30,000 lipstick job.
And the risk.
The other thing too is like at the end of the day, let's say it's a rental, like it's a 3-unit. Who the hell cares if I bought it for 3 or for $1 million and lost my ass on it? Like all you should care about is right. Like once you own the property, doesn't matter if the guy before you made $1 million or made zero. Like all that matters is you focus on you and what your goals are. Right. Like people get so lost in all these other areas.
They do.
Like, it's a distraction.
It's a huge distraction. People get lost too in like market stats. I know. So Mark and I have both been on BP for years. I know we've both gotten into many discussions about the declining population in Chicago, right?
Which actually increased the last 10 years.
Yeah. And it depends on the area too, right? Like the declining population on the south side, but it's increasing on the north side. So you can't also look at like market stats, like general stats and say like, oh, well, the whole city of Chicago is experiencing this because this is what the stat says. The Chicago is way too big. So 294 square miles. Even I always say like looking at stuff from a zip code level is still too big. You really need to look at it from a neighborhood level and understand like what's going on. So we'll put it in the show notes. I pulled some stats over either the last year, the last 3 years, some market stats of 2 to 4 unit properties. I pulled them in Jefferson Park, Albany Park, North Center, and Logan Square. Just so that we had them for reference and you can look at them. But, even that market doesn't necessarily capture the whole picture, but it's the only data that we have available to base things off of.
Cool. Awesome. Last question, and then we'll wrap. Are there any areas on the north side or any neighborhoods on the north side that you think are overinflated right now? Just people are being unrealistic.
Like Lincoln Park, obviously. Again, like those areas, Lincoln Park, Roscoe Village, Andersonville, North Center, Bucktown, Wicker, even like parts of Logan, you're not buying there from an investment perspective. You're not. You're buying there because it's where you want to live, right? And you're willing to take a hit on cash flow to get there. Like probably like Humboldt Park too. Like Humboldt Park, just east of the park. I don't like that area at all. For me, like my perspective. I think it's still quite far from transportation. The properties aren't that nice. There's still a lot of crime and issues going on. Yet the prices are ridiculously expensive. That's like the one, like that little nook right there, just between the park and Western. I don't understand it. I don't understand why prices are so high there. But everything else is that when you'll look at the stats when we put it in the show notes, they've been steadily increasing for years, right? It's one of the questions I get a lot is, like, oh, well, these prices have jumped. They have not jumped. We have not seen a drastic increase in pricing at any point over the last 7 years. It's been quite steady looking at stuff. And like I said, a lot of our clients are with us from day one. They're typically looking at, 2, 3 buys with us. And whenever they're ready for their second or third, it's always a readjustment for them. When we start showing them the numbers of like, whoa, 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 I bought 2, 3 years ago and these numbers are crap. And we're able to like, well, this is what the market will deliver now. We have to reset your expectations on things. And every year we have to keep doing that with clients. Every year the cap rate goes lower and lower, right? Every year the prices go higher and higher. It's how it's been.
Awesome. Good answer. All right. Ready to wrap?
Let's do it.
All right. So how you've gotten these questions before, so I'll mix them up a little. Like, how'd you do so awesome in 2021? Like in your brokerage, like what's your competitive advantage?
Being aggressive. Just having to bend over backwards, right? Be aggressive, make sure we're the first ones on the showings. We use being one of the top 10% of agents in Chicago, I have access to a lot of pre-market stuff that most other agents don't. So again, just being on top of things, being competitive, being aggressive, and making sure from the get-go our clients have the right expectations.
Yeah, expectation setting, huge one.
Huge one.
So, Brie, you've already provided a ton of advice, but what is the one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago? I mean,
do what it takes to get comfortable, right? Like I said, it comes down to expectations and being aggressive. If you were seeing that property that you really, really like, but you hesitate because you're not comfortable, meaning you're not ready yet, it's going to cost you that property. And I've seen it too many times where clients hesitate and then they lose out on it or they didn't offer on it. And then they spend the next 6, 9, 12 months trying to replicate that property, right? Because nothing compares to that property. So, winter's slow for us. Our market typically does not pick up until April, May. Use this time to research, right? Use this time to ask questions, to look at properties online, right? To go back and look at old property numbers, so that when the market does pick up in spring, you are comfortable and ready to go.
All right. What, 8 months pregnant, what do you do for fun?
Sleep. You think I'm kidding?
Nope, story checks out.
No, I still work out. I was just doing burpees the other day. My coach was like, really? Brie, you're doing burpees? That's really it. I said, I've got a 2-year-old. So this is the first year for like little kids where they're starting to get things. My daughter was like so obsessed about Halloween. We had Halloween in our house for like 3 fucking months. Not sure if I could swear, but sorry. So like now that this is her first Christmas where like she's able to get it. It's like we paid for Santa to come to our house. The other night we took her to zoo lights. Like we've got like Christmas just threw up on our schedule. Seriously, like 2 to 3 times a week, we're doing Christmas events. We're doing breakfast with Santa on Saturday. Like it's all so much fun for her first year of like getting what Christmas is. So like that's really what's fun for me right now.
Wholeheartedly agree. Right. And then you're going to look back in 10 years and be like, oh, it's over.
Yeah. Right.
Enjoy it.
They don't believe it. My 4-year-old nephew came home the other day and told my brother that he doesn't think Santa's real. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so early. He's 4 to like start doubting Santa. Don't have him call us. I don't want him talking to my 2-year-old.
Let this ride as long as he can.
Yeah. Because it's a threat, right? You get to tell him like, if you're not nice, right? Santa doesn't bring you anything. Like you should get a few years to be able to use that.
Oh yeah. I pull that out in June if I need to. All right. So what is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
So again, I think I mentioned it in the last show. Like one of the best books I've ever read was Getting Things Done. It's an organizational to-do list book. Still my favorite book. As far as it changed my business. That's really the best book I've ever read.
Cool. Besides yourself, name one person in the local network that you'd highly recommend to our listeners.
Besides the 2 of you?
Besides the 2 of us.
That's there's so many though. I really, let's see, construction wise, I've just recently worked with RJ De Leon and Mike Baker. Awesome for construction. Lending wise, we work with George Landon at A&M or Sam Sharp at Guaranteed Rate. Awesome as well. Our go-to lawyer is Ben Wong. Love him. Really again, like it's about like people, oh God, people always want to talk about building their team, right? And a lot of that comes later in the process for you. But finding people that you're comfortable with that have your back. We just got into a transaction where our client wanted to pick his own lender and his own lawyer who we've never worked with before. And it's absolutely terrifying because like our service providers, like they're on the ball. We get things done. And now we have to work with people that we've never worked with before. And already it's been like 2 weeks. I'm already uncomfortable with like how things are going and how much I have to remind them to do their jobs. So who you work with and your network of providers is absolutely important.
100% agree. And you mentioned RJ, him and Nikki were on episode 43. If you haven't listened to that, go back to it. And we've been trying to get Mike Baker on here. I've bought a few properties from him. He's been a little gun shy. He said it's not his thing.
I'll text him.
We'll see him tonight at the Windy City REI. So we'll pressure him a bit. So, all right. Well, Brie, you've provided a ton of value to our listeners. Thank you again for coming on. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
You can come babysit when the new baby comes. I take free
I will
cooking,
also take that offer.
Free cooking, free cleaning, free childcare would be fantastic. I don't know. I'll be on maternity leave until the spring market picks back up. But really, you can find me on Bigger Pockets. I'm always on Bigger Pockets. My website, secondcity-re.com. They'll put all that in the show notes. And again, like, I'm here to help as much as I possibly can. And, looking forward to working with anyone that has any questions in the North Side.
Love it.
Nice.
All right, Mark, I don't know if we'll get this one, so I'll give you a shot and then Brie, you as well. So it's not multiple choice, making it tougher on you. So every Labor Day, Chicago hosts the Taste of Pelona Festival. Sometimes it makes major headlines. They've had, I think George Bush has been there, Dick Cheney. It's held at the Copernicus Center, which is located in what Northwest Side Chicago community?
Is it a North Center?
No, Northwest Side. Come west. Where do we have a beautiful Polish population out here?
Right there at Lawrence and 90th.
You got it.
Yep.
Jeff Park. Jeff Park's the official answer here.
Yeah, Jeff Park. All right. Yep. No,
we got that in the Irish American Heritage Center. We got both of them here.
I should have known that. I actually, when you first get a realtor license, you have to take that 2-day course. I actually took it there, so I actually knew that.
On to the next one. Sorry.
All right. All right, Brie, thanks for coming back again. We'll look forward to a third time. Tom, thanks as always. Listeners, you're listening to this in the new year, so you should be motivated to be out networking and connecting with other investors. Please visit straightupchicagoinvestor.com and select investor meetups. We've recently updated all of the information, added a couple new networking events, and there's a lot of people that are meeting in person. So it's a new year. Get back out there and network with other investors. And then don't forget to refer the show and leave a review. Brie, thank you. Tom, thank you. And listeners, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks all.